Welcome to episode 19. You probably all thought I disappeared, didn't you? Well, no, I'm still here. But the reason for it is back on February 23rd, here in Michigan, we actually got a significant ice storm. From what I understand, it was the second worst ice storm in Michigan history. Now, this ice storm knocked out power for about a half a million people in my area and displaced quite a few as well. With our local airport being shut down, we had many travelers that were vying for hotel spaces, and the same for local residents as well. Now, it was a very difficult time, being that it was very cold, and what I got to witness while going through this myself, um, amongst my neighbors, was heartbreaking. It really was. And the reason I say that is I'm in a very working class neighborhood. There are a lot of fixed incomes, and I would say just barely out of retirement aged folks. And like I said, it's a fixed income area. And when I was outside with many of my neighbors assessing damage, and they were openly discussing what they were going to do. And I was one of the lucky ones. By no means am I a well-off individual, but I was prepared for the power outage. I knew it was coming, and I had been one of those that were lucky enough to procure a hotel room for some time. And when I would come back and forth between the hotel and my home to check to make sure everything was still in one piece, a lot of the neighbors were they were scared. They were scared because they didn't know how long power was going to be out, and they were trying to figure out, what to do. Uh, Many of them did not have the means to even get to family because of the ice storm was so bad that in other areas where family members were, not just for myself, but for neighbors, they got a significant uh, amount more. They got a they got a much more significant amount of ice than we had, and we got quite a bit. For us, we got about a half inch of ice, and there were places north of us that received over an inch of ice, and it was devastating there as well. Now, because of this power outage and my experience with my neighbors, it inspired this segment. And I was planning on putting this segment up uh, last week, right at the weekend of the power outage, but the power was out for about 5 or 6 days. And once power was returned, I was able to come home, and of course, I had to try and get things back to normal. And a few days later, we ended up getting hit with an additional snowstorm. And unfortunately, in my area, we actually were on the band of freezing rain and sleet. And so, what the original ice storm, the damage that had caused, missed, this particular storm actually took care of the rest. And once again, we were without power for about 48 hours. Now, it was disturbing, and just watching the neighbors react, figure out how they were going to make it to the next day. And so, of course, it got me curious. Why? Why are we unable to withstand, inclement weather? Our power companies, try their best to be prepared for it, have the crews for it. So when this does happen, to have power back up, quickly. So also, there are communities that are around me that never lost power. And the reason being is that their power grid is modernized. Instead of having power lines that go from pole to pole or pole to structure, their power lines are underground. So, regardless of weather, they will not lose power unless there is like an actual core generator issue back, where the actual power is distributed from to the state of Michigan. So otherwise, they don't have that issue. So I decided to actually start going down the rabbit hole. And what I found was pretty interesting. And it might actually shed a little light on the state of Michigan, not just the state of Michigan, but nationally as well. So I actually found a article um, from what is called the Conversation. It is a news outlet online, of course, that actually had done the research back in, when was this done? Okay, in 2017. Now, mind you, that's 6 years ago. So this is the cost 6 years ago, what it would be to basically rebuild our entire electrical grid across the nation. And what they calculated was just over $5 trillion, 1.2 to 2 trillion just for materials. Okay, and then of course you have the 3 trillion that would be for labor, the logistics, everything. It's it's not cheap. So it's like, well, wow, that's a significant amount of money. But then when you think about the trillions of dollars it would be to replace and upgrade and modernize our electrical grid at $5 trillion, you look at it makes you think about all of our other like unnecessary spending our government does. Now, on average, I've actually did some work here. Let's see. Here we go. Where is it? Not that one. Where is it? Here it is. Okay. This is from Forbes. This link will be in the description. Um, Now, we're all aware of the war between Russia and the Ukraine. In this last calendar year, oh, excuse me, the United States has actually provided over $112 billion to the Ukrainians. Now, that's in dollars, 100 billion. So it made me think about this. Like, well, we just gave, the Ukrainians to fight the Russians $100 billion. How much other foreign aid have we actually distributed in the last, we'll just say 10 years? So, as I can see, started going down the rabbit hole, started asking questions. And on Google, I found this at Forbes. From 2013 to 2018, okay, just in that 6 year span, $300 billion. You're probably thinking, well, that's, for 6 years, foreign aid. Yeah. Well, now think about this. Just this calendar year alone, the year of the Ukrainian-Russian war, 112 billion. Now, we'll just take these here, the 2013 to 2018 as an average. It's from 2018, so we're going to add 5 more years onto that. All right. So you figure another, we'll just say $250 billion that we've actually spent in foreign aid, okay, in 10 years. Now you add on the Ukrainian war. That is a significant amount of money that we have given to foreign nations. And for what? We get angry about, our roads not being, fixed. We're complaining about our, electrical grid being out of date. And you look at you just even recently in the last couple weeks, you see how poor the rail lines have been maintained. Yes, the rail lines are actually managed by the actual rail company owners, but that's actually overseen by another federal office. And it's up to, those rail lines to actually maintain those rails. And they have to follow those regulations. Well, it's clearly they're not. But you look at that. Just in since 2013 alone to today, it's almost a trillion. We're right around $800 billion that we've given away in foreign aid. Okay, yeah, I understand that we actually, there are things out there that we want. We're the richest country in the world. We want to actually help these other countries, these third world countries. The people there, they don't have the wealth and the means that we do here. I mean, even our poorest, our homeless have more wealth than many working families across the world. Yes. I mean, poorest families have air conditioning. Think about that. The poorest families in America can actually have air conditioning. Yep. So, right here, about $800 billion in just this last 10 years. And how long have they actually been telling us that they're actually going to, invest in infrastructure? I remember it all my life. I mean, we wake up every day and we see, the construction barrels and the signs all over the freeways and all of our local roads. There was a joke me and a cousin used to have all the time when it came construction season here in Michigan, which is basically March through December. And it was funny because whenever we would be out, we'd be like, there's never anybody out here. Why don't we ever see anyone working on this stuff? All the stuff's here, but nothing's ever getting done. So it just seems like that they're just moving the barrels and the cones to one side of the road to the other for the next season. And that's it. And the roads are in the same shape as they were prior to them actually being fixed. So, of course, I started doing some research even further. All right. Yeah, it's national. What can we do? All right. Our local infrastructure is, determined and what has to be paid out by our own politicians, our local governments. So it's like, all right. So I'm going to start looking this up. I want to know, what are we doing here in the state of Michigan for our infrastructure? What are we doing? So I did some research. Here in the state of Michigan, in July, we were actually given a grant. And that grant comes from, let me find the name of it. It is the, stupid me, it is the MSIO. They are the one that actually distribute and not control or manage power grid in this sector of the United States. So, based on approval, Michigan was actually given a grant of $10 billion to modernize their electrical grid. Now, you think about that, $10 billion, that's wow, that's fantastic. But then when you go through when you go through this article, okay, michiganradio.com, it will be in the description. That $10 billion only has the ability to modernize 95 miles of line. That means only basically taking what is from pole to pole or pole to structure for a 95-mile area, $10 billion. And that's probably taking the power lines from the pole, probably doing the burying under the ground and actually modernizing the grid. More robust cables, burying the cables, better, better insulated, materials. So it's going to be more expensive. Now, a lot of that cost isn't for the material itself. A lot of it's for the labor. Because we're not talking about, something simple. You're digging up streets, you're digging up sidewalks, you're digging up people's yards, you're digging up, all this stuff to bury these lines. All right. And then you got to make sure that all this equipment is actually capable of, you know, sustaining itself without, being destroyed. It's got to be well insulated. So there I'm thinking, wow, $10 billion. That's a lot. You know, good job. Good job, Michigan, for getting this grant. High five. So also continue to try to look into this just a little more. And we have another online, news outlet called Mlive. And I actually found another article from April of 2022. And this was a bill that was passed here in the state of Michigan. And it was for $4.8 billion. And this was to spend it on infrastructure. So MLive was kind enough to actually list of what this bill would actually cover. So I started, cycling down through the list. All right, and they come this beautiful graph telling us what we're going to do with this $4.8 billion. Now, many of you know that uh, here in Michigan, Flint, Michigan, they've had water issues for years. Stupid water issues. Things that should have never happened. You know, everything was neglected. You know, they had old lead pipes, they had contaminated water, everything. And people were drinking this. They didn't even know it until it got to the point where, you know, there were so many court cases, it became a national story. And it was forcing the state of Michigan to actually fix this. Well, this grant actually goes into a little bit of that. As we can see in the graph, the majority of this bill is actually going to the water crisis in Flint to rebuild the actual pipes and, you know, the desalination plants, just to, you know, the sewage plants to, you know, to clean the water is really what it's going to be for. Now you look at this, look at the graph, and it's showing you $2.2 billion. That's a lot of money. Great job. Okay, another high five for the state of Michigan. Very good. Now we get into the rest of this chart, and you know, it makes you wonder. You look at this, okay, you understand you got a couple small pieces of pie they don't give any description to, because there are just so many other small segments of this bill that, you know, they can't list on this chart. Now you think, okay, transportation. Great. Okay, so that means roads. No, it doesn't. They're actually talking for the bus lines, mass transit. Um, so that's where that money is for, what was being allocated to. They have a couple others, and they really don't get into the detail. But as I kept reading and kept going down, they actually had a more detailed breakdown of what this is going to. And looking at all of this, many of the infrastructure projects that they have listed here are small. They're actually small projects. And it's not for what is actually needed. Like in our case, roads. All right. We know we need our roads fixed. They're always allocating money and they're always trying to fix our roads. But like I said, it's just moving the cones from one side to the other. Now, we know that we need a new electrical grid in many parts of the state. Okay, it needs to be updated, it needs to be modernized. On this infrastructure bill, there is not one mention of electrical grid modernization. Not one. Why? Is it because they got the grant from MISO? Is that why? And so all they're going to do is 95 miles of new laid wire? It's not a lot. It's not a lot at all. Now, the reason it's just I'm actually frustrated. So forgive me if I go all over the place right now. I'm just very frustrated because, you know, we look at that $5 trillion to revamp our entire electrical grid for the country. In the reason why it's so frustrating is I know that we're all aware of the war with, you know, Russia and the Ukrainians, between the two of them. Since the start of that war, the United States has given the Ukrainian government $112 billion. $112 billion. All right. And you're thinking, yeah, that's a lot of money. Well, yeah, it's a lot of money. But taking into consideration what it's being used for. Okay. They're fighting back an invading force. Well, yes. Okay. All right. Now, what I decided to do is like, okay, that was just this past year. So I'm thinking, like, well, how much have we given away in foreign aid in just say the last 10? I'm not talking about just trying to rag on Biden or Trump or Barack. You know, it's all of them. It's it's our leadership. Now, this particular website, Forbes, okay, they were able to go back and they broke down from 2013 to 2018 of how much we have given out in foreign aid, dollar value. Okay. Right here, we're showing from 13 to 18, just under $300 billion. Now, that's just for 6 years. Now, I took these numbers, and you can do it yourself if you want to, just use a calculator. Um, we needed to add. So what I did is I took the average of all six of these, of how much we were giving out every year, which turned out to be about $47 billion. All right. So I wanted to know, okay, what is it for the 10? So I took this average and added the additional 5 years, just using the average. And I'm sure it's within a few $1 billion. I'm more than likely it is. So you think about that right here, you have $280 billion. All right. You're adding another, 200 billion at minimum, okay, to this for the last 5 years. All right. So now we're looking at $500 billion. We'll just say $500 billion that we have given away in the last 10 years in foreign aid. Now, we have the Ukrainian war. We gave 110 or $112 billion to the Ukrainians. Okay. That is $600 billion. $600 billion we've given away in the last 10 years. Well, it's going to cost 5 trillion in order to, well, in 2017 money, $5 trillion. Okay. So you have $500 billion. Okay. That's a start. Think about that. All right. Because the biggest question is, it's one thing to be generous and to help our allies and to, do some things for foreign aid. But the biggest question is, what are they doing with it? What are they doing with it? I mean, is it, $25 million to Pakistani gender studies, which is what we did in 2021? Yeah, it's part of the first omnibus package, the $1.2 trillion package, the beginning of Biden's administration. $25 million went to Pakistani gender studies. What the hell are we doing? So this is what's frustrating about it. All the fat that we're seeing in all these omnibus packages, all these bills that are being, passed by the government. All right. They're sending that money overseas for stuff like that, when we could be using it right here to replace a $5 trillion, electrical grid, to modernize it, to harden it, not just from inclement weather, but from, our foreign adversaries. It's bothersome. So this, so it's like when you really start going down the rabbit hole for this stuff, it's, it just shows you. It's all here. It just goes to show you once again, as I said in the last segment, they don't care about you or me. When you have garbage like that being just thrown away, that's, think about this. Now you're looking at, okay, it's $25 million. $25 million. What's that going to do? Well, as we see, okay, FEMA in Palestine, Ohio rejected, uh, rejected help. They said that they would not go out and help them because of what had happened. It's the responsibility of Norfolk Southern. All right. Norfolk Southern has got to, take care of all of this, clean it up, all of it. Okay, yeah, that's Norfolk Southern's, responsibility. But what about the people? I mean, it's an ecological disaster. It's just as bad as any other, but yet FEMA won't step in. I mean, if we got $25 million to send to Pakistan for gender studies, you're going to tell me that they can't find the money, or they couldn't use that money to actually help these folks out in Palestine? This is our problem. This is our problem here in the United States. We can't get anything done because we have too many lobbyists and too many, foreign uh, interests in what we're doing with our own money. And, it's, as much as I don't want to see, you know, people die, in Europe, or, where, in Ukraine, in this war. All right. We're we shouldn't be there. They're not a NATO country. They're not a NATO country. I'm saying it. They're not a NATO country. And, you know, I don't know. It's frustrating when you see things like this. It just is. But I don't know, kids. I really don't. It's sad because I watched in the last 2 weeks several of my neighbors literally break down in frustration, crying because they didn't know what they were going to do. Because, you know, they couldn't afford to, they weren't lucky enough to be able to afford to go stay at a hotel for a week. They couldn't get to family members who are outside of the storm area. And I'm not, just complaining about it because of just it happening here or happening to me here in my neighborhood. I mean, this happens all over the United States. This is happening all over our country. Our own people need our own help, but we'll send $100 billion to someone else so they can go fight a war. We'll give someone $25 million so they can actually, gender studies. Yeah, why not? Screw my citizens. Who needs them? That's what's frustrating. And then when you do get the money, you have all the red tape that you got to jump through the hoops to get allocated to do the projects that you need to get done. I mean, you look at the road work that's being done here in Michigan. Right now they're actually repaving, they're reconstructing Interstate 275. That was in the plan. That was planned for and applied for like close to 7 or 8 years ago. And it's now just being started. It takes that long in order to get any projects done. So by the time a project is done, they already got to put permits in for repairs. Oh no, it's a shame. It's a shame. But what can we do? You know, as much as I as much I know I'm complaining, but still, it just I don't know. Maybe that's why, you know, I'm America first. That's simple. It should be America first. Oh well. But anyway, I'm gonna be done bitching. So yeah, it's been a while, so I knew this was a little lengthy. But but still, check out this stuff. Check it out. Links are in the bio, and you'll be able to see this for yourself. It's disturbing. It really is disturbing. I mean, you look at us. We used to be that, like I said, that the shining city on the hill, but we're not that anymore. This country's falling apart from the inside out because we're too interested in the industrial, military industrial complex than we are actually our own people, our own problems. But but I guess that's the cost of being an empire, huh? And yes, that's what we are. We are an empire. And I will say this, just like all other empires, they eventually fall. And we're doing it to ourselves. But on that, kids, I'm gonna go. It was good seeing you guys again, and hopefully I can get something up again earlier, you know, than 2 weeks. And maybe in a few days I'll have something else up for you. All right. I will talk to you later. Be good. Say your prayers, take your vitamins, and be good little Hulksters. See you next time. Bye bye.